shop floor control. Again, we'll take questions at the end. And so without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, the first thing to start with is in shop floor control, what you're going to find in SBM is when you load up our sample data, okay, similar to the way we did it in SAE when we added serial lot tracking, those of you who remember that. In serial lot tracking, with our sample data, we actually went in and created a series of item numbers that started with SL. They were based on the standard I-50, I-45, I-40 that we've all demoed at one point or another. So what you'll find in the sample data is there is an R series of items, okay? And the R series have routes defined for them. Now, in our case, we're using a database that we converted for the purposes of initially showing you that conversion from SAE into SBM. However, once you load up our standard base sample data, you're going to want to focus in on those R series when you want to demo the items that deal with routes, okay? All right, so the first thing I'd like to talk about as far as shop floor control is concerned is tools. Now, basically tools, and as you're going to see, much of shop floor control remains the same functionally, okay, but we've added stuff into it. So with regard to tools, let's just bring up the form. As you can see here, it lists out all the tools. There's no more Finder. Bringing that up to search for it, you get your list out here. Double-click on them, and this form's going to look familiar to many of you who've actually worked with shop floor control. A couple things to note here on this. We have a dispense button up here, which will dispense the item that you've linked to the tool. Okay, that's the same as SAE. I'm just pointing that out. Dispense is up top. Okay. Much of these fields are the same. The BOM where used tab now, though, allows a drill down to the revision of that BOM. So if you wanted to launch the bill of material from here, make some changes to it, click the drill down, select your revision, and that will bring it up for you. Okay, now, one thing that's missing from that form that you may or may not have noticed is the substitute button. Okay, there's a substitute tools function in SAE. The location of that changes in SBM. Okay, in SBM, we've logically put that substitute tools function under the production menu. Okay, and we've enhanced it a little bit. Some of you may recall that when you were going to run a substitution in SAE, it actually allowed you to specify a range, okay, but it would go through and globally change the tool reference across all those BOMs or MOs. Well, now what we give you is a form here, substitute tool. You plug your base tool with the tool you're going to replace. And then you have selections here that you can choose. Now, these selections will dynamically update this form based on what you want to update. So if you want to only update bills of material, select your checkbox. If you're driving the selection method by the range, it opens up this form where you would then specify the ranges of bills of materials and revisions that you want to affect. Okay, the tool would remain the same in anything outside of that range. If you also want to affect MOs, you click MOs. You can specify parameters for the MOs that you want to affect as well. Okay, now there's another selection type that we've added in here, which is list. If you select list, what you can do is click on this, and you can actually choose from the list of selections, and all of these selections will actually contain tools within your range. Select the rev that you want to affect, include it, and then click OK. When you proceed with this, it's only going to affect the BOMs or MOs, that works the same when you're going by list, that you've chosen. So you have the ability now to pick and choose specific bills or specific MOs that you want to do the substitute for. Okay? So substitute tools. All right, so tools, substitute tools. Now we're going to jump to production shifts. Okay, this is a big shift from SAE. In SAE MISys, the shifts were defined for each specific work center. Okay, now those of you who've set them up, you remember, you go into Mash Files, create your work center. One of the tabs there is the shifts. That's where you're defining the availability of that work center, right? And we use that to determine its availability to drive the load and overload and things like that. Well, now the production shifts are actually global. Okay, you create them and define them under administration, production shifts, and you can create as many shifts as you want. All right, now what you're going to find is similar to what we're seeing here. If you do a conversion from someone from SAE into SPM, obviously that conversion is grabbing work centers, right, which each have shifts defined for them. So logically what we do is create a shift with that ID attached to it. So these are all valid shifts, but we're naming them after the work center they were converted from. Okay? The default is going to represent the shift you flagged in SAE as the default shift. Okay? And that one will be called _default. Okay? So when you bring this up, this looks very similar to the way it worked in SAE. You define your shifts down here. Select the one you want to make as default. And then anytime you create a new work center, this would become the default work center shift. Okay? And we'll take a look at that in just a moment, and you'll see how that works. Okay? On the Work Center Where Used tab, you're getting a listing of all the work centers that are currently using this shift ID as its production shift. Okay? If you need to drill down, it's got a drill down right there. You can launch that work center. Okay? Now there's another category we've added with regard to shop floor control. Okay? And this is called Work Center Classes. Okay? Now Work Center Classes basically allow you to identify and group common work centers that would belong to a certain class. Okay? So for instance, if the client you're working with happens to have multiple work centers that do the same thing, okay, you can group those work centers under a class. And that can be used for various functions in MISys, such as the production schedule, okay, by filtering based on the work center class. So, for example, if we wanted to create a new one, okay, we'd say new, and let's just create a class called assembling. Okay? This is going to group my assembly work centers that I'm going to create. Okay? So I give it in here. These are my assembly work centers. All right, if I want to attach a document to it, I can. I save it. It's that simple. Okay, so now I have one up here for drills, one up here for assembling, if you want to see what they look like when we have something in them. Okay, so I have a drill work center, and I have alt drill 2 work center. Okay, these might both be the same or similar. Okay, I happen to know that any drilling I need that can go through, I can use either one of these work centers to facilitate that. Right, they're both the same type. I'm grouping them by work center class. Okay, so let's go into work centers. All right, so the work centers, again with this list off to the right, okay, quick and easy. I can take a look at every single work center I have. All right, let's bring one up and take a look at what they look like. Okay, so assemble. All right, one of the first things we see here is the status dropdown. Okay, the status dropdown can be set to active or inactive. All right, inactive work centers can't be added to MOs, and already existing MOs that have routing details referencing this work center won't be able to be processed through shop operations. Okay, so, you know, if, say, a work center breaks down or something like that, or there's a problem with a given work center, flag it as inactive. Any production that attempts to take place at that, you're going to get a prompt that tells you that work center is inactive. Okay, so we have a status selection now. All right, the class, this is where you're going to group each of the work centers to a class. Okay, now it's worth pointing out too. The work center class is an optional field. Okay, you don't have to group their work centers in classes, but you have the ability to do so. Okay? The shift is where you specify the production shift that this work center adheres to. Okay? The times, you'll all recognize those are the same. We do list out the hours per week on the header tab. All right, the rates are still here. This is new, all right, to give you the availability based on the production shift. All right. Okay, efficiency in SPM is now more than just for reference. Okay, this percentage drives the processing times based on the percentage you enter in here. Okay, now that gets reflected in the production schedule that we're going to see later on, as well as in the master production schedule. Okay, in that, right now it's processing at 100% efficiency. Okay, so that means for scheduling purposes, these are the times that we're going to use for planning. Okay, we're going to say it's 15 per unit, 3 minutes of setup, 1 minute of queue, 5 minutes of wait. Okay, if I have this set at 50%, okay, for instance, I think I have one in here. So let's go jump to Assemble 2 here. Okay, Assemble 2 has an efficiency percent of 50. All right, that means it's half as efficient as Assembly 1, or the base assemble. Okay, so as we're going to see here, for the purposes of scheduling or in the production schedule, okay, this one's going to take twice as long to process the units through it. Okay, that could be any kind of miscellaneous factor. That could be, I happen to know that the employees that are working there tend to take their time a little bit. Maybe I have new employees that I tend to group at this one work center, right? So they're not going to be as efficient as ones at the main assemble work center. Whatever. Maybe the machines are old, they don't process as quick, what have you. You have the ability now to use this so that when we're doing calculations in the schedule, we're going to plan for that. Okay, we're going to plan for that. All right, so resources work basically the same. You've got labor, overhead, material. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Those of you who aren't familiar with how overhead type items works exactly the same in MISys. The way this works is you would classify an item in master files items as an item type outside processed. That gets added onto this work center, okay, as a material. You would put that item in and reference a purchase order here. Every time an assembly passes through this work center, we automatically receive the quantities on that PO of that outside processed item. That's just a real quick refresher for how outside processing works. But this is where you're going to start getting into those outside process item types. Okay. All right, so let's just group this under our assembling class because it's assemble. All right, we'll save that. BOM where used, MO where used. Okay, these again are just inquiry tabs. We do have a drill down off the order. The inquiry tab drives the same functions that you had in SAE. So you have a dispatch, you have a load, and you have a dispatch Gantt chart. We'll take a look at those real quick just to see what they look like. Let me push my dates out. Okay, we'll take a look at the dispatch. Okay, I plug my dates in. I see here are the activity I have going on at this work center on those dates. I get my operation numbers. Okay. One advantage to this one over SAE, you now have a drill down. So if I wanted to launch this MO, I click the drill down, throws the MO up for me, and I can make some changes to it if needed or process it, whatever I need. Okay, so there's a drill down from the dispatch now. Okay, the load chart. This looks very similar. Okay. Mouse over gives you specific information as it would pertain to that day. You have a key down bottom to tell you what each of the colors indicate. Okay, so I've got some overload here. Okay, and then there's a dispatch Gantt. Okay, gives you the MOs over here to the left, key down bottom. Again, similar to any of these charts, you can click and drag, okay, to zoom in or out. Okay, you also have, those of you who are here for the scheduling, remember these little controls over here to the right. Zoom the time span to get all the activity. or zoom based on the dates you ran the dispatch Gantt for. This is the beginning, this green line, this is the end. Okay, and again, the mouse over gives you information about what's going on there. Okay, the update routing button. Okay, this allows you to select specific bills of materials, specific MOs that you want to update routing information that you may have changed for this work center. Okay, but we've amped this up. Right? Each of these selections will dynamically update the form based on whether or not you open it up. Okay, so if I don't want to touch the bills, I just want to affect MOs that are maybe using this work center, I select MOs. I can go by range, and then I select the times that I want SBM to update the routing details on these MOs for. Okay, so if I made a change to runtime, I want to push it through to a certain range of MOs, here I go. Right? Just select runtime, I click update, it goes through and updates all that information for me. Okay? I can also go by list. Edit my list. Now I can pick and choose manufacturing orders. Again, and this list is isolated only to MOs that are referencing this work center. Pick and choose the ones I want to update, click OK, and it pushes through those changes just to that MO when I click proceed, okay, or update. All right, so you can go by list, by range, update bills, or update MOs, or update both. Okay, make your selections. Those of you who remember SAE, this was another global function. It pushed through everything, okay? All right, so we've seen our work centers. We've covered tools. Let's talk about substitute work centers. Previously, when we were on work centers, you'd have a substitute button there, okay, in SAE. That allowed you to substitute one work center for another, okay? Similar to what we did with tools, we've now put that under the production menu, substitute work centers. Okay, the selections now were being driven by that new UI, which gives us a lot more control. So I pick the work center I want to select. In this case, we're going to give you the first demonstration of work center class. So I'll select the finder, and I'm going to say I want to go through and substitute assemble with, hey, it grouped them by class. So it took out all those other work centers I had and showed me just work centers that in theory now are going to be common to assembly. All right, so now I can figure out which one I want to use. I select Assemble To, and now I can use the Edit List function, or I can go by range to update just my bombs, or just my MOs, or both. Okay, and if I want subsets, I go Edit List, and I pick and choose which ones I want. Okay, substitute work centers. All right, so let's jump over to bills of material real quick and show you some changes there. Okay, bills of material. All right, so we've already covered most of these tabs, so what we're going to do is jump specifically to the routing tab. All right, now this is much the same as SAE, okay? Couple of changes, though. Operation code, okay, is now not locked into being a numeric number. Okay, in SAE, as you insert details in here, it's getting an operation number, okay, similar to these. This is from a conversion that we did, right, from SAE. Okay, but now what you're going to find in here, we'll go to an earlier one here. Go to, say, I-45. What you have the ability to do is use alphanumeric characters to identify the operation. Okay? So how's that useful? Well, now you have the ability to give it a meaningful identifier as an operation. Okay? Maybe my kitting gets done in the stockroom. Right? So my operation is stockroom. Okay? And it's in the kit work center. Right? Or maybe my kitting gets done in warehouse B, you know, what have you. Okay? You can use meaningful codes now for your operation numbers. Okay, one other thing here. Let's jump back to I-50. Okay, you'll notice most of these are the same milestone. Again, milestone indicates that each of these operations have to be processed in this sequence. Okay, if I deselect these, I'm telling the system it's okay for me to process my operations in whatever sequence I want. They're not locked into this order. Keep in mind, though, the first and the last, just like in SAE, are always considered milestones. Okay, you got to start with the first and end with the last. Note the security group field. Okay, security group now allows you to specify the security group ID of users that you want to have the ability to process this operation. Okay, if you leave it blank, anybody can process this assembly through this operation. Okay, if you put in admin in here, only the administrator can process this assembly through this operation. The normal user could not. So if they have a high-level operation or something that's, that they really only want specialized users to be processing in, okay, you can assign a security group to a given operation, and that means that only users in that group can process it through there. Okay, so let's say, all right, I've defined my routes. I still have to classify the operation number that each of my materials are used in. Okay, that's how the schedule knows when this item's needed in the assembly process, right? That's used for scheduling. That's used on multiple reports. So this is very important. Now, previously, and you can still do it, you classify the operation right here by just selecting the finder, pulling up the operation to find in the route, and you move on. Okay, there's also now an Edit Bill of Manufacturing button that you can use. Okay, simply click on an item, drag it to the operation you want it to be used in, click Done, okay, and it automatically gets updated on the detail. Okay, and that's available on the Routing tab as well. You see that update, that Edit Bill of Manufacturing. Now let's say you want to move multiples. You create the bill of material ahead of time, then the client says, all right, well, I want to implement shop floor control. Okay, so you define the routes for them. Everything's going to be listed, okay, with a blank operation, which means it shows up in the last op. Okay, if that operation code's blank, that works the same. You can now control-click. Let's say they want everything to be used in the first op. You can control-click your details, drag them up. Now everything's used in the first op. Update your materials, and now you're all set. Okay, everything's used in the first. I got one that's using the fourth. Okay, Edit Bill of Manufacturing. Okay, so the chart button, let's cover this real quick. It works basically the same as SAE, but I just want to show you what it looks like. Okay, in SBM, plug your display options here in the quantity. Okay, it defaults to reorder quantity. It's what we're hanging our hat on as your typical build quantity for this item. Okay, give it a date so we can drive forward how long it's going to take you to build that quantity. You can go forward or reverse. Okay, mouse over shows you the start times and dates and end times and dates at that op. Okay, right now we're using overlap. We can tell that because operations overlap. If we deselect it, recalculate, okay, everything's now sequential. We're not overlapping operations. Want to use optional shifts, recalculate, doesn't look too different. All right, and that's bills of material. So let's jump to manufacturing orders. Take a look at what's different there. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk about with MOs. All right, a couple of these we've already seen before. First, on the Materials tab, okay, operation number, this gets driven from the bill. You can still modify it on the MO. So for situations where you need to change or tweak what items are used where, you've got that Edit Bill of Manufacturing button. Like the BOM, okay, now you're just changing this manufacturing order to shift those details around, okay? And it automatically updates the MO materials so that you can shift when your item is used. Cost tab. Okay, those of you who recall SAE Level 3, we had two costs that we were dealing with. We were dealing with the used cost, okay, which reflected labor and overhead based on routing times defined on the MO. We now have just completed cost, okay? Required cost is going to reflect now what's defined on the routes and those times. Completed is now driven by time that gets entered through shop operations as each of these operations are processed. Okay, so completed cost is that labor and overhead is going to be driven by the shop operations time. Okay, the routing tab. Pass by it here. Again, gets the security group. So as we're processing through here, I have one specific operation. I only want certain users to be able to process. I plug in the security group, and that locks that operation down so that only those users can process through it. Okay? Again, blank allows any user to do that. Well, what else do we have here? A material status button. Okay, we're all familiar with the Traveler. That's still launched from here. You can still launch the chart. Looks just like the bill of material. Okay, we also have material status. Okay, this is similar to the MO material status. Okay, that was a report in SAE. Okay, it gives you a breakdown of every operation on this MO that you can launch from the MO form. Okay, to tell you where the various items are and where this MO is in the production process. So right here, I'm out on Op 3. Okay, I've got some queued quantity, right, for this manufacturing order. Okay, can launch that right from the manufacturing order. Okay, and again, the chart, just look at that. Okay. Now, from this manufacturing order, we also have a button up here called Process Shop Operations. Now, you'll remember in SAE, when you were ready to process your shop ops, you actually went into that Shop Operations icon, you used the Finder, selected the manufacturing order you wanted to process, pulled up the operation you wanted to process, and then entered your information. Well, now, from the manufacturing order, and you can still do that, we still have a Shop Operations function, but from the MO, we have a Process Shop Ops button. Okay? Click that button. It lists out all the routing details, okay, for this manufacturing order so that you can start processing on it. Okay? We're attempting to streamline the whole process, give you multiple access points to the functions you need, okay, to make things easier, more user-friendly. Okay, so we launched that from the MO form. Okay, and as you'll notice, most of these types are similar. We've added one called direct labor. Okay, those of you may remember, if you had to attribute additional time to an operation without actually driving any quantities through it, you could make the time selection, which you can still. However, if that work center happened to have overhead resources and maybe some material resources as well, you're going to affect those as well when you enter the time in. Maybe you want to just add direct labor. You can now select direct labor, okay, and it will apply just the labor item based on the time and quantity you enter in here. You have the material status button located on this form as well, in case you want a quick update as to where the activity is. All right, up top, you get routing information that's also available on the routing tab of the MO. Okay, so you can see it all at a glance. Dispense tool. If you're using tools and you have that tool linked to an item, click on dispense tool. That will perform a dispense transaction of that item, okay, to reflect the fact that you're replacing a tool. Okay, select your item. This all works the same. Starting a quantity at an operation, checks for any materials that are used in that op. Okay, if they haven't been moved into WIP, we move them from stock to WIP. Okay, completing it at that operation completes that quantity. Remember, if you complete the last operation, that's what actually builds the parent item on the MO. Okay, you're going to enter time in here. That's used to drive how much labor, overhead, and material resources get consumed based on the work center you're on. Okay, scrapping the component, that scraps a specific material that's been used on this MO up to this point in time. Scrap assembly is going to scrap all the materials based on the quantity you enter in here that have been used up to this point in time, whatever operation you're on. Okay, but there's no more cycling through operations, okay, using the finder to figure out which one you're on. Okay, you simply select the one you want, and then you process it. Okay, shop operations from the manufacturing order. Okay, so that's manufacturing orders. So let's talk about work orders and how they relate to shop floor control. Okay, now work orders are totally new in SPM, right? So what we do know from the past seminars is work orders can now be linked to manufacturing orders. Okay? Now, what I'd like to show you is if you manually create an MO, all right, and you add a detail to a manufacturing order for an item that has a route defined for it, so let's go I-50, okay, Rev 0, we're building 10. We're going to give it a date, so we'll say the 16th. You get a prompt automatically saying, hey, this assembly happens to have a route defined for it. Do you want to create an MO for this as well? Sure, let's do that. Okay, create the MO, inherits the dates, the quantity, the location, all that information, the materials. I've got my routes. I'm going to save it. I'm going to release it. Okay, you don't have to release it there, but I'm releasing it now. Okay, and now I'm going to release the work order. Now I've just created a work order and an MO, linked them up automatically for this I-50. So now I've got control over the routes, the materials that are going into building this I-50. Okay, does that mean I can't necessarily process this I-50 from this MO? From this work order? All right, we all know a lot of times, even though we define routes for the bills of material, they go to the MO, those times stay the same. Does everybody use shop operations to process each MO through each detail? Not necessarily, not all the time, because you still have the ability to use the complete function on the MO. So you still have the ability to use the complete action on a work order. That's going to go through, automatically complete the MO. As far as the accounting and usage is concerned, we're going to drive all of that based off the routing times. Okay? So I can still do a complete from here. I process it. Okay? Goes through. It's going to build one of my I-50s. We saw it consume some labor, so we know it's hitting work center resources. Okay? I'm now going to jump to MO22 real quick. Okay, M22, completed quantity of 1. Go to my cost tab. I've got a completed cost reflecting some labor and overhead. This is all based off default times on the route. just as if I had come to this MO and click complete on it. Okay? But on this work order, I could literally go down through and insert 50 details on that work order and create MOs for them at the same time on the fly as I'm inserting them. Okay? And then if I wanted to build them all, let's say we're dealing with short production times, I might get a slip up from production saying, hey, we just built 50 of this item, 50 of that item, and 60 of that item. I could plug those in here and just run off completes if I need it, you know, if I'm not dealing with big lead times. I'm still getting labor and overhead tracked, right? But I'm just using the default times. I don't need the fidelity to get down into each of those details, right, and get actual time through shop ops. If I did, or if I wanted to, I click on Execute Shop Ops from the work order. Execute Shop Ops goes and grabs that MO, gets the route defined on that manufacturing order so that I can process it and update the MO. All right, so this is another access point to get to my manufacturing order to go ahead and start processing my production. Okay, I can do that from here too. All right, same form, so I won't get into what everything does again. All right, Execute Shop Ops from the work order. All right, so let's talk about production shop operations. All right, this is directly comparable to shop operations in SAE, right? You go into shop operations, form comes up, you bring up the finder, select the MO you want to process, dig through, grab your operation, right, and then start processing that way. Same deal here, okay? But again, we're working that UI to make things more accessible for you, okay, so that you can get in and work with what you need to as quick as possible, okay? For work orders, all right, obviously we want these to be linked up to MOs. So we're going to open that up, right? Here's the item. I can go ahead and select it and process my shop op that way. I could come up here to an MO, double-click on it, okay, get my prompt telling me, hey, this is linked on a work order, so be careful what you do, right? We're just going in and processing these to give you a look at what the form looks like. Same form that we've been dealing with before, okay? But that prompt actually brings up a good message. When you're showing people this, that's a warning prompt, okay? If you have an MO linked to a work order, you want to keep them in sync. So if we were to actually process this, okay, the work order would now be out of sync because the MO can't possibly update the work order because you can have multiple work orders all referencing the same MO. We have no way to know which one to update. All right, so that's what this prompt is telling you. Hey, be careful. You've linked this to a work order. You probably want to do this from the work order. Okay? All right, but we can come in here, do the same thing. All right, so let's bring this form up real quick. So this is available on the other forms as well, okay, but I wanted to show you what it is. If you click on the barcode input, all right, this is a form that is comparable with the barcode scanner being used with the keyboard wedge where you're going to wand in each of the fields. You get a tab sequence worked in that barcode, and they're wanding their information in here. That's what this form is for, barcode input. All right. So let's go to shop operation batches. Okay, these are the same as SAE, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. SAE, you'll remember, we have a barcode import, so those of them that are using the handheld scanners, they're plugging in their shop operations based on that barcoded traveler. That's all in here. It gets put up to a file. You import that into a batch. You then post your batch. Okay, that all works the same, still available. You can manually insert lines in here. Okay, the fields are exactly the same with the addition of a work order. Okay, you process those, post them at your leisure. That's what goes through and updates the MOs. Okay, so let's talk about the production schedule. So we have our MOs in the system. Maybe we've got some work orders created that are referencing those MOs. They're building items. Okay. In SAE, there was no outstanding way to get a world view of the production floor. We have reports that are showing you what's going on. We've got charts that give you the load, the overload. You could take those MOs, print out the load charts, the load reports, scale back and forward those dates like we've all seen, right, on the MO to accommodate the capacity of various work centers, do what we could, right, to get the load under control. All right, it was rather cumbersome. Again, we're trying to make that as easy as possible, okay? So in SBM, what we've got here is the production schedule. Now, we already looked at it, okay? We checked that Gantt view. We've seen what it looks like with the orders. Here are all my orders that are out there building my various items. I'm going to sort it by items. Here's the items. Well, we now, with the advent of shop operations, can use this production schedule to provide us with an analysis as well as the facilities to help shift the dates and operations around, okay, in a more efficient way. All right, so what we're going to do is click Shop Operations down here, and we're going to plug in parameters that we're interested in. Okay? So what we can do, give the dates you're interested in. If you want to include optional shifts, go ahead and include those. Right? We can make our selection of work centers that we're interested in by range. We've all seen the list at this point. Work center class, if I'm interested in looking at those. All right? We'll keep a range. We'll keep it open for now. Manufacturing orders, we can plug a range in if we're interested in. Or we can go with a list, edit our list. When you bring this up, select the MOs you're interested in. We'll go with 19 and 20. Yeah, we'll keep those. All right, and work orders that we're interested in. Okay, we'll initialize it. Right, now we get a display based on those parameters of what's going on at each operation and when. Okay, so what I see here is, if I shrink this down a little bit, okay, in March I've got some activity going on. We still have a key down here, so the Gantt and the overlay help you determine what's going on with each of these operations. Okay, now there are a couple things I can do here. Right now, I mean, we've got a very isolated display, but what I can see here is, okay, these guys are okay. So Operation 300 looks good. Operation 400 looks good, and 500 looks good. I've got a conflict here, though, with 200, okay, and 100. Okay, we're overloaded there. So what are my options here? Okay, I've got a couple I can do. I could click and drag this out to a date that's going to get me past my conflict. When I do that, this schedule recalculates everything. So I see that by dragging it there, that worked fantastic for me, right? I got 100 clear. But what happened here? 500 is now in conflict. Well, that's not going to work. Now I got to deal with that one. So I'm going to click it back here, right? Note the little red arrow just to the left of my cursor so you can see what date you're on, right? We'll try it here. How's it work there? All right, well, now I'm still in conflict with 300. All right, so now I'm back to where I was. All right? Let's go here. Okay, then I might drag this one out. Okay, still got to move this one out a little bit. Okay, that one looks good. Drag this one out. Okay. All right, and so on until I clear my display. I've got my dates. Now what I can do at this point, if I click Save, it's going to update all the MOs that are affected by this display so that the dates now are in sync with the work I've just done here. Okay, now I'm just dealing with two MOs, obviously. Okay, but if I had a whole series of MOs in here, maybe I group them by work center to see which ones are overloaded, and then I reinitialize this without saving any changes here. Just show me just one work center. And then I scale those off to get them to work the way I want. Okay, and I take them one work center at a time. Maybe I isolate my dates down a little bit, and I use this UI to help me get control over those dates. I'm working to handle my capacity through this UI. Okay? Now, if I screw the whole thing up, and I've clicked stuff all over the place, I'm totally lost, I don't know what I did, all I got to do is click Cancel. Do you have unsaved changes? Do you want to close without saving? Yes. I want to reinitialize. I got to start over. Goes through it, reinitialize, I'm back to square one without having damaged anything. I didn't screw any dates up. Okay, nothing, everything's back to where it was. So, what's the other thing I can do? Well, I happen to know that I have other work centers that I could use in place of these. So what you'll notice is when you cursor over one of these, the note at the bottom says double-click to substitute a work center. Well, I happen to know when I'm dealing with assemble, we just set up assemble, right, to be grouped in what? The same class. So now when you double-click one, we've taken the time to group our work centers under a common class. I see them all listed here. Okay, I select the one I want to use. Right now, it's using assemble. I'm going to say, hey, use assemble too. Okay, so I substituted that manufacturing order. Now I have 200 and 300 to deal with. Okay, so I can substitute work centers by double-clicking, okay, and grabbing the one I want. If I don't have classes selected, I'm going to see selections like this, which allows me to substitute whichever one I want for whichever one I want. So I got to do a little work here to figure out which one I want to substitute. Okay, we'll go with kitting 2. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm making headway by using some of those alternates. All right, so let's cancel this one more time because there's one other thing. I know we're running short on time here. One other thing I want to show you, okay, with regard to this. All right, so we've initialized it again. Now we're talking assembles. Now I want you to pay attention right now to where this is taking up. All right, so right now, MO2 is using Work Center Assemble. Okay, we're going mid-Wednesday to mid-Thursday. I select Assemble 2. Drive it out. What happened? It just extended out over a day with Assemble 2. Those settings are identical except for what? Except for the efficiency. Okay, Assemble 2 has an efficiency of 50. Assemble 1 has an efficiency of 100. So it takes longer because I'm not as efficient at that work center as I am at the other one. That's going to push through to the rest of the work centers, and I'm going to get an accurate reflection based on the efficiency. Okay, so very powerful tool here. Again, this is a sandbox. You go in here and play around all you want. Okay, just be sure to click cancel. Right, you cancel, close without changes. You haven't heard anything. Okay, play around in there. Very powerful tool. You're going to find all kinds of fun stuff you can do with it. Just one other note, keep in mind when you're playing around in there, even when you save the changes, okay, if they have an existing schedule that's out there, by schedule I'm talking now master production schedule, right, that we looked at in the previous session, it doesn't automatically push those changes through to the schedule. So you will have to reinitialize, just as if you had gone to the manufacturing order itself and changed something on it. You have to reinitialize to bring those new changes in. Okay, but in particular, when you're working with the production schedule, especially once you get your system down and how you're going to be changing dates, you get in there and you start shifting things around. You're changing dates of requirements on the backside in existing schedules. So you've got to reinitialize those to take into consideration the new dates. Okay. Real quick here, just to push through to the reports. Once they get shop operations, shop floor control. Your shop operations get their own group, okay? We've grouped all the MO-specific shop floor control reports underneath this report heading. They're all going to be very familiar to you. Okay, again, if you want to click samples, you can then cycle down through to take a look at what each one does. Okay, and the information it's going to show you. Okay, but what you're going to find once you start poking around in here, you have all the same reports as in SAE and then some. Okay, once you start playing around with those parameters and options we provide from the report UI. Okay, and I think at this point we're ready for questions.
Okay, Doug, thanks very much. You know, I think you've done such a good job. We only have one question. Can you believe that?
Well, for now, though, we tend to
start I bet we might get a couple more. But at any rate,
right.
Let's take the first one from Sonia, who asks, are work orders taken into consideration when calculating the MRP?
Well, yeah, meaning, I think what you're asking, I'll be very specific. When you release a work order, the schedule will look at that and to determine what's going to get used to build that assembly. And in the case of routes, it's going to consider routes as well for a routing defined for a bill. But yes, so the answer is yes, it's got to be released though.
Yeah. So inactive work orders don't count, is that right?
That is correct. And it's the same is true for manufacturing orders as well.
Anybody else got a question? You know, when you showed that capacity management screen, I'm reminded of, maybe 15 years ago, going to an APIC show and being in the Computer Associates booth and watching them demonstrate their big, I can't even remember what the name of it was. I just remember that it cost $2.1 million software package that sort of did what this screen does.
Is that right? Yeah.
It actually didn't do it correctly, and it was they were trying to debug it, but it's a good thing we've been able to drop the price a little bit on that.
Yeah, substantially.
Yeah. So Frankie Chan asks, is conflict the same thing as overload?
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, you use the word conflict.
Yeah,
I'm same as an overloaded work center?
That's exactly. Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is you've gone over capacity in that work center for that day. So, you know, the options we looked at there are being able to click and drag these out, you know, to relieve that, and then work your way forward from there, sure, or substitute.
Okay. Any other questions? Don't be bashful. Okay, from Jamie. From last time, the question of estimating 10,000, and you wanted to know the requirements for 2 items. Would you do it via batches?
From last time.
Can you see that question, or do you want me to read it again? From last time, a question of estimating 10,000, and you want to know the requirement for 2 items. Would you have done it via batches?
Estimating 10,000 require. I'm not sure I follow what that question was. Estimate. I'm guessing you're talking about a manufacturing order.
Jamie, are you there?
So on the cost tab, you can print your estimate. Is that? But you want to know the requirement of 2 items?
Yeah, maybe Jamie will make that more clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Dana says maybe they're talking about available to promise.
Oh, sure. Okay, available to
promise.
But
available to promise was just one item at a time. I think you made that clear.
Yeah, that is one item at a time, so you would have to do those individually. There's no batch for the available to promise, so you could have multiple entries in there if that's what you're asking. No, it would have to be one at a time.
Well, let's just assume that that was what the question was, unless we hear otherwise.
Sure.
From Frankie, is there a function to auto-resolve a conflict by automatically scheduling another work center under the same class?
Not automatically, no. You would have to do it one of the ways we looked at there. There's no kind of precedence in place to say, hey, if this one goes over, go and shift the work center to this one. You would have to do that, yeah.
Yeah, doing that automatically would be a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, that would almost require some, like you said, some kind of precedence to be in place where,
Well, I think what that requires is the ESP module, Doug.
Yes.
Okay. Here's Jamie back. I don't know if Jamie is he or she. Available to promise, would you calculate via batches or quotes? Available to promise is only one item at a time, right, Doug?
That's correct. Yeah, one item at a time.
So we got to do it. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, unless there are any more questions, I'll say you've wasted another perfectly good hour learning about MISys SPM. Just kidding. I hope it's been useful to you. Thanks very much, Doug, for your very thorough understanding of this product. And we will see you next week for the next session. Remember that in the next 24, or at least by Monday sometime, you can see the recording of this session and register for next week's sessions if you've not already done it. So thanks very much. Have a good weekend wherever you are. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, all.